Welcome back to the second event for the Rio Bike Nights. My name is DK. I'm the city's bicycle coordinator. So without further ado, on behalf of the City of Fort Collins and FC Bikes program and all of our partners, the Rio Grande, your group ride, welcome Dan Burden.
Thanks, DK, and good evening, Fort Collins. It's great to be here. I have not been in Fort Collins for almost 14 years. So it was time to get back. And you are truly one of the, you know this, but you are truly one of the most outstanding communities, not just with bicycling and overall, what I'll say, a focus on people rather than cars, but just truly getting the very important bones and ingredients together for building a great community. It's going to matter a lot, and we're going to need all the models that we can get. So I'm here in part to show you what some of your competitors are doing, and to show you, and I think you'll see, in some areas you're way ahead of folks, but there's so many brand new ideas that are being tried that you'll probably pick up a few that will apply directly to Fort Collins, and we'll probably see them on the ground in 2 or 3 years if they're the right tool. So I tend to be a very visual person. I'll go ahead and get into my presentation. And in doing so, I really want to talk about how we're going to transform our nation from one of the least healthy places in the world, one of the least active places in the world, one of the least sustainable places in the world, to one of the most beautiful, most profound, most prolific, and truly we have that creative energy in our nation to transform every street over time, but we've got to start with a whole series of streets and model them and get the ingredients right so that we can bring back the life, the vitality, the energy that makes an area be fun, alive, dynamic, and so on. I like to say everything starts by being centered around the human foot, but also on nature and on being able to create those connections to the beauty that surrounds a community, drawing right into the very heart of the community. And so many of the images you're going to see tonight were taken from all over North America over a period of over 20 years. And I would say the great majority of the ones I'm showing could not have been photographed more than 10 years ago. Some 15, some 20, but truly we are now in the early stages of transforming our nation to again relate to the human foot, to human power, and to put people in a connection with their environment and with other people in a very rapid pace. So this was meant to be just a little bit of an intro to show how diverse our choices are in building trails and building road systems and building places for people to gather, and again, all based on a different scale. This scene, which is Davis, California, you can imagine what the cyclist must be thinking. Essentially, huge numbers of people are migrating from places like San Francisco to Davis. Davis has always been credited as the most bicycle-friendly town in North America, and held the title well, and held it for a number of years, but they're starting to slip, and they're slipping quite a bit. It's important to understand that one reason they're slip is what we're looking at is people are looking for cheaper housing, they're leaving San Francisco, they're moving into a place they don't understand. They're voting for the wrong things, and so we're seeing less professionalism coming out of places like Davis, and we're looking for the new giants to emerge. My whole experience in bicycling started back when no adults rode bikes. Starting around 1960, 1962, sitting in high school one day, I dreamed up I would bicycle the world and led an expedition from Alaska to Argentina. Married my wife Liz, Another couple joined us, and over time, journey on a journey, 30 different bicyclists joined some part of our expedition. It took 3 years, and it was celebrated in National Geographic. I've been a photographer all of my life, and what I like to say is that by showing you frozen moments in my own life and the lives of others who are out discovering, exploring, that we can now start to see those things that matter the most to us. I think it's also important to point out that we could point the camera in any direction. There used to be a saying that Life magazine photographers stood in the flowers and photographed the garbage. Well, National Geographic photographers stand in the garbage and photograph the flowers. I'm going to be showing you mostly the positive side of things tonight. The gentleman I'm shaking hands with is a name that you'll probably already recognize. He also rode a bike from Alaska to Argentina, Dan Buettner. He is the one who started Quest Network. He has now written the book Blue Zones and a new book that will be released by National Geographic in November called Thrive. And I'm going to talk about these concepts a bit tonight. But he is going to re-energize cities one at a time, but he gets the bicycling side of things. You're also in the coming months going to see some major media releases, including one by National Public Television. It'll be a 2-hour documentary on active transportation, active living, active lifestyles. The film crew that is covering this entire documentary is the original crew that covered Woodstock. Pretty cool. Now, let's start with some theory, and I'm going to take everyone in this room back to the 1400s. Can you all plan that you're in the 1400s? Right. Now, we all know how the universe works, don't we? We were taught that in church. We were taught that in school. Everything revolves around planet Earth. Am I right about that, folks? Am I right about that? Yeah, this is the 1400s. Along comes a gentleman named Copernicus, who, testing out this idea with mathematics, says it can't possibly be. It wouldn't work. So he comes up with this sun-centered theory, and after a while, everything worked, but he was ostracized by his church, by his society, by science. And now I'm going to propose something equally radical. Fast forward, it's today. Everybody out there, I mean everybody, starting with the auto industry, but with really, truly every basis of an economy, we know that everything revolves around the automobile. Are we right about that? What if it's not true? What if we are now about to discover that it really revolves around the human being? That for thousands of years, all economies were based around the human being. It's only this momentary hiccup in time, 70, 80, 90 years, that we got so far astray. And this is what we left behind. This is the best that the Florida DOT could do to carve, slice, dice Tallahassee, Florida, to get people home to the burbs as fast as the people wanted to get home. In 16 years, 16 people were killed here, every one of them a pedestrian. If it lasts another 16 years, we could predict another 16 losses of human life. This road, though, is going through a major transformation. Some of the scenes I'm going to show you tonight. So I want to start with setting a foundation that the things I'm going to show you that we're in love with, just think through the Cherokee Indian story of the grandson and the grandfather, that inside every human being lives two wolves. One's not good, and one is. And if we listen too much, or we feed the bad wolf, we'll end up with what the bad wolf produces. But if we start to listen to the good wolf, and we feed that wolf, then we'll get a totally different outcome. So somewhere 20, maybe 30 years ago now, one city, Portland, Oregon, started to transform its downtown, and later many of its villages into places for people. And it has become one of the most sought after places for people to live. In fact, many people lost their jobs throughout the nation, and they said, well, if I don't have a job, at least I can move to Portland. And that's what they did. They have a higher unemployment rate right now because people said, well, if I'm not going to have a job, let's at least live in a good place. And that's truly what happened. But I also want to set a basis in history for what we're about to discuss. And that is that the very father of traffic engineering, of driver's manual, of all traffic law, William Phelps Eno, could not imagine us building any highway that wouldn't fully accommodate pedestrians, cyclists, and equestrians in his era. He got it right. Where did we go wrong? But we've gone very wrong. If you follow the red bar, the graph, you'll see that the population growth, which is in green, that our vehicle miles traveled per day has long ago become non-sustainable. This is not anything that we can run an economy on. We've got to bring these two very close together if we're to have a sustainable world. And they're still very far apart. By the way, the vehicle miles traveled did level out about 6 years ago. Next week, I believe it is when Dom Nazi is coming in. He'll probably talk more about that feature. But Europe, many nations in Europe are ahead of us, if not all of them, and some of them are much further ahead of us in reducing vehicle miles traveled by car per day. And so when we're looking at where Norway, for example, clear back around 1990, finally leveled out, that's where we need to be. And indeed, we need to get down somewhere closer to Norway. And also notice that when we look at fatalities, that although we like to say, well, it's coming down, not much. Canada made a decision to cut their traffic fatalities in half, and they did. We've only cut ours during that same period like 10%, and that's mostly due to airbags and a little bit to seatbelts. Has very little to do with highway design and driver behavior, very little. So, if we want more of this, the good wolf will give, the bad wolf will give it to us, but if we want the other, then we have to feed that wolf. Really good news, this administration seems to get it. They have looked at the data, they are very well schooled in the science, and it's not just the US DOT, but it's also HUD and EPA are now teaming. They have meetings every week, and they're starting to come up with a whole series of approaches that will be taken to shift how we build our cities and what we build and what we support. It's also important for us to understand that even if we wanted to keep building what we were building, we couldn't keep up with it. In fact, over the last 20 years, we only added 2% to new highway construction, although we grew our traffic by a whopping 70%. And with the cost of building things going up and a willingness to pay for new taxes, you can expect that to drop to 1%, if even that. We're talking about very new times. And so now let's talk about the positive, happy things. In the future, I think we'll see more ads that look like this scene where the person with the right bike and the right transportation mode attracts the greatest number of people. Minneapolis, where I was 3 weeks ago, has become now the #1 bicycling city in the nation. This is a cold climate, Minneapolis. They have been building this for decades. 3 weeks ago, they introduced the Nice Bike program, which is way cool. You insert a credit card, it gives you the code, you unlock a bike, you ride it. If you don't ride it more than 30 minutes and you push it back in, it subtracts any charge. You could do that all day if you wanted to. Or $5 if you just want to keep the same bike all day long. But what really fascinated me as I bicycled through Minneapolis, is seeing the number of bicyclists I wouldn't have seen 10 years ago. Everyday Joes and Janes and people that just are out because it's the nice way to travel. It gives us exercise, it allows us to meet lots of people, and it truly is the most affordable and efficient transportation that can be invented. It's actually more efficient than transit. When you get down to the basics, gives you more freedom than transit. And so we're seeing more and more scenes like this, certainly in a few key, what I'll call indicator cities. But we're also seeing new programs. This one's not brand new, cops on bikes. But we're seeing more and more diversity in how people get around. It's a fabulous thing for families to be able to do together. As children later take to the streets on their own, it gives them an independence that nothing else can. But it starts early, and it starts perhaps with some training wheels, but it ends up with cell phones and beautiful bikes. And more cell phones. So let's fast forward to Colorado. Colorado has been a leader in bicycling and bicycle touring, in everything bicycling. And we're seeing so many great diverse models that we can transport one idea as one part of the state to another part of the state, opening up the outdoors, opening up access, giving freedom for people, and let's just say with money, and people just with a desire to have that freedom. And with all this, let's now talk about what is a good place to ride a bike. This is any place that is designed well as a community where the buildings orient to the street, where there's on-street parking to keep the speeds low, where the natural speed is bicycle speed. To me, that's the best bicycling you can come up with. There's no artificiality. It's natural. It allows everything to work. Now, if we feed bicycling, and in this case with money, we get profound results. Years ago, when Atlanta was going to put on the Olympics, many, many years ago, they studied how much investment it would take to increase transit by 1%. And it was something like $200 million. But to shift over the mode, take that 1% and put it into bicycling would have cost $20 million. So I think you can see the advantage of putting the investments now in those modes that don't require a lot of big sophisticated systems and hardwares and so on. So with that in mind, we now know that if we make the right investments, that we can get profound results with increased bicycling. And again, get a lot of scenes on our streets that we might not have predicted 5 or 10 years ago. I was very pleased to look at who was riding bikes in Fort Collins today. It's a fairly diverse group. We'll look a little bit in this presentation on facilities. This is a road that was just a rugged rural road for a while. Speeds were exotically high. And then we put in a brand new road with bike lanes, with trail crossings, and narrowed the travel lanes down on purpose to 10 feet. And I'm very, very proud of this road. It's in Port Townsend, Washington, and it's now receiving all kinds of awards. But what's really cool about this road is it's not that unique. It's just a road that got redesigned correctly. And it is showing profound results in how well it's used, how much courtesy motors afford to pedestrians and to bicyclists and so on. Another road built at almost the same era. When we were asked to come into this community and work with them, we made these recommendations, and we went from an incomplete street, let's go back, a 5-lane road where speeds were high, fatalities were high, walking was low, bicycling was non-existent, and now you can see the road as it's been transitioned. Today, there's an incredible volume of people that are turning to walking and bicycling. Now, if we're to shift, we need to change what we measure. Forever, this is what the engineer has been told to measure. How many cars can you move and how quickly without delay? And that's it, period. Well, what about no, that's it. What we're now saying is that we will begin to measure many other things. And indeed, in time, we may not even bother trying to keep up with levels of service for the car. That the car will naturally come to a place of saturation. It just will. And so to focus on those things that we should measure, how many children do we see in a downtown walking to school? How many seniors do we see? How many people with disabilities? How many folks that don't earn good incomes have good access to all the places they'd like to get to because they have a transportation system that's designed for them as well? The foot, the bicycle, and transit. So I'm going to show you some of the challenges we face. This is a college town, Chico, California. Now, do you follow me with the road that there's a place where the lower road, as it goes to become the upper road, has to join the road in the middle? That's referred to as a confluence. Because of this confluence, traffic here will back up about 1.5 miles in all 4 directions. 6 hours a day. So what the engineer would normally do is buy up, in this case, $300 million in real estate and expand this road up to 5 lanes. But we don't have that kind of money anymore. And so what we're suggesting is you don't do that. You build a little more network here, and this becomes a village. And now anyone within, say, a half mile by foot can go and get many of the things they need. A person on a bicycle can come in 2 miles, 3 miles, and get the things they need, so you're reducing vehicle miles traveled. And now, because you've got more network, you can move the same number of automobiles with only 20 minutes of level service F, not 6 hours. That's a huge difference. So we now combine land use with transportation. Yes?
If you do something like this, doesn't it make it faster to go by bike?
Oh, well, if you do this, bicycle will win because you basically have shortened the distance the bicycle needs to travel. Yeah. So what would the road change look like? This is that road today. And if we make the modifications, they're not high priced, by the way, because we don't even touch the drainage. We get colorized bike lanes, colorized center turn lane, green it up, and now, here's the cool part. We increase the value of the land 3 to 5 times by putting the right street in. And now, a developer can come in and build great density, create a sound wall to the homes that are further back, and give people great housing, and now we have eyes on the street watching over. So what we're talking about is designing streets so that people now would prefer to walk or bicycle or to use transit. And just to give you a little detail, this is what that road cross-section would look like. By the way, this is being handled inside of a 60-foot right-of-way, back of sidewalk to back of sidewalk. And it can move, once we get all the features in place, easily 25,000 cars a day. That's a lot. But it also acts for bicycling, walking, and so on. Now, let's lay out a foundation for what we're about to talk about. And in a nutshell, we're talking about building entire systems now, not only around the human foot, that's an independent science, but around the bicycle. And in doing so, we're talking about different speeds, handling far more volumes of bicycling, and truly adding many eyes to a community and really making a community more livable and fun to live in. So what would I measure? As I do, and I try to do this every weekend, is how many weddings do I see on a bicycle? The day I photographed this couple, I photographed 2 other couples all on bicycles in Vancouver. It's now popular to have your wedding on a bicycle. And that's part of the transition. So have we had bicycle weddings here in Fort Collins? All right. All right. A sign of the times. Now, why is Vancouver a city that you want to go to and travel, poke around in, to bring ideas back here? The gentleman you see in the light blue jacket is Gordon Price, the director of the city program for Simon Fraser University, one of the best universities to study urban design. And he was 6 times city councilor for Vancouver as it went through its greening years. So this is a group that I assembled from all over the world to study bicycling and transportation. On this particular day, I said, you're on your own, stay in groups, but everywhere you go by bicycle, stop anywhere and look every direction. There will never be a time where you don't see people walking and bicycling in all 4 quadrants and in multiple numbers. What Gordon is explaining to us as we stand in what is a fairly busy street for 15 minutes, where is the traffic? These are 12-story buildings. And that's the point. Once you get in a certain density, you're supporting people not having to even own a car if they choose not to. Certainly not driving it very often, because it's always easier to walk or to bicycle or to use transit to get to the same destination. So many people use their cars on an occasional basis. And this is truly what all of us saw. It looks like any street, like one say here in Fort Collins. And, but this is the chemistry, this is the magic. The city basically took its old industrial yards, its rail yards, that went clear around the peninsula, acquired them, and then sold off the land to developers to put in the big tower buildings. The first feet of right-of-way belongs to the public for the trail. It's the developer that builds the trail. It's the developer that maintains the trail. It's not even a city cost. And so a lot of design goes into this. And the city oversees the design so that it'll be a delightful place to bicycle through. And so if we back up from that, you can get kind of a picture. You have your low 4-story buildings next to the trail. That gives you a sense of enclosure, but not being towered over. And then if you look back further, that's where the tower buildings sit. And then there's a required 80 feet of separation between each building, so that the next row of buildings also gets a beautiful view of the water. They have very carefully thought through what a city of the future should look like. And you want to honor your water, you want to honor your trail as the great, good, common space. Madison, Wisconsin, another one of the very great bicycling and walking cities with profound results from their investments, and again in deep snow country. And beautiful streets, streets that come alive, and massive number of parking. So let's look a little bit at the tools, and I think almost everyone in this room is going to be familiar with them. So what I'm really going to show you is the transition in our thinking. Back when I was the bicycle pedestrian coordinator for Florida, a title I held for 16 years, this is what we were permitted to do, which was nothing. And every evening, all of the traffic would back up here because you can't get across the street, and everybody was trying to get to the few places that were there. So truly, traffic would move about 1/2 mile per hour for hours every night and all weekend. It was not a pretty picture. Walking was good. You could walk past any numbers of cars you'd want to, but it just didn't work. The next step, and this was done incrementally, this is what we were allowed to do, was to put in a wide curb lane. Now, wide curb lanes work somewhat, and I think you can see some of the benefits of a wide curb lane. I think you can also see some of the problems. One of the worst problems is many bicyclists would get up and ride on the sidewalk, as you see here, which depresses the desire to walk and the ability to walk safely. So over time, we were able to convince the authorities that bike lanes made sense, that it gave a dedicated space for people to bicycle. And I think you can see here, we actually kept widening the bike lane. Can you see the line keeps shifting over? The old scrub line and then the new. And so over time, we kept taking space out of the travel lanes. And the more space we took out of the travel lanes, the safer the road became. I saw a sign coming into Fort Collins I've never seen in my life before, and I've got to go back and photograph it. It was a huge orange cautionary sign saying, "Warning, 10-foot lanes ahead." I want to go back and scratch out the 10, move it to a road that's got wide lanes and say, "Warning, 12-foot lanes ahead." 12-foot and 11-foot lanes are more dangerous than 10-foot or 9-foot. Motorists lose their vigilance if you give them too much room. Now, that's not true with a freeway, but it's true of every surface street that's ever been studied. And we've studied hundreds of thousands of lane miles in all 50 states, and the result is always the same. 9 or 10-foot lanes, when you're ready to put in bike lanes, you have a space to grab the extra footage to put the bike lanes in. They've already been narrowing down this particular street in Santa Barbara, State Street. They're down to 10-foot lanes now. They had been 12. My suspicion is they're going to take them all the way down to 9. And each time they narrow the lanes and add a little more width to the bike lanes, the motorist ends up safer. And it's just true, that's all. Now, let's compare lane widths. In this case, we have a sidewalk which would not work if the bike lane was not there. Am I right about that, folks? Who would want to walk on that sidewalk if traffic was shoved right up against the curb? So I say, number one, there are 22 benefits of bike lanes. Only 2 are for the bicyclist. If your town never had a bicyclist, never thought they'd have a bicyclist, you still should be putting in bike lanes. It's the smartest investment tool you can put in for every other street user all the time. It also, of course, gives you more turning radius, a breakdown lane, all kinds of benefits. But notice on this street, we purposely put in 10-foot travel lanes. That was done on purpose. This is a brand new street. Now let's change those dimensions. On this road, the travel lane is 12 feet. The bike lane's only 5. We get higher speeds, worse crashes, and it's exactly the same curb-to-curb dimension as the scene that I just showed you. So put the dimensions in correct, you get a more profound safety result, and you build a good system to buffer pedestrians and things like that. Stay away from 12-foot lanes. Here we have what are 10-foot lanes, and this used to be a 4-lane road. The margins of safety just went up astronomically. Now imagine yourself, again, assume there's never to be a bicyclist there, but you're the motorist and you want to turn in or out of a driveway. When that was 4 lanes, you couldn't get into that driveway safely because you didn't have any turning radius. But now you got plenty of radius. It's just one of those many multiple silent benefits of a bike lane. So we can look at them from many aspects, but one of the things that I hope you're doing, and if you're not, here's my recommendation. Don't put in 4-inch, don't put in 6-inch wide stripes. Put in 8-inch or 10-inch. It's a little more paint, but the impact is dramatic. So you see what we've done here? And it's really just a matter of like double striping, and it brings down the speed, and it does create a more attractive and a more functional space to ride. And again, we see bike lanes on every category of road, from collector category on up to major arterial roadways. These are in Cornelius, North Carolina. Notice they put in what turn out to be 7-foot parking bays, a 2-foot valley gutter. This is one of my favorite combinations. You add a valley gutter next to the parking lane, and then you put the bike lane out beyond that. And now you've got a very good buffer between the parking and the bicycling. And also, this is done with 10-foot lanes. This was done on purpose. I'll skip through these fairly quickly because I think you get the broader picture of bike lanes. But we're now building them in all brand new developments. We can even go to a brick road, in this case, just widen the gutter pan to, say, 6 feet. Now, do sometimes motors drop one of their wheels in the concrete? Yeah. But they could get a ticket doing that, and they know they can, and most of them don't. So, which is better, on-street or off-street? Well, the answer is clear. It depends. And so if you have no driveways, put in all kinds of bike trails, right? But if you have a lot of driveways or a lot of intersections, then look seriously at the lanes. This is Davis, California. Notice the effect of having the line of trees and the ground cover. Gives you a very keen sense of enclosure. Now we'll skip to the street side. And notice that what Davis likes to do, and they'll do it almost everywhere, is they put in both bike lanes and trails where they can. Brand new street in Portland, Oregon. Narrow travel lanes, 9-foot travel lanes, brand new street, built from scratch, and then bike lanes, and wide enough that they can keep clear of car doors. Brand new, this is the first treatment that I know of in America on a major arterial road, back in angled parking, and the bike lanes next to that. Now you don't want straight head-in parking next to a bike lane. You just don't. But what about back-in? It's a brilliant combination of tools. So this is brand new, just photographed that on Saturday. And very good road. This road is the one I showed you from the aerial angle. The lanes are now down to 10 feet. We think they'll go down to about 9.5 feet when we're finished. But each transition makes the road safer for all users of the road. Again, double striping for the bike lane line. Brand new street in Olympia, Washington, just opened this weekend. New treatments for roundabouts that give the bicyclist the opportunity to just cycle through the roundabout, since you're bringing speed down to their speed. Or for those, say, with their family or more timid, they now have a ramp that takes them around the roundabout. You want it to be steep enough that you're slowing them down before they start to mix into a trail situation. I understand that you're now doing some new road diets. I know you did road diets earlier. I helped work on one 15 years ago, I think. But does everybody get what the definition, the phrase road diet is? Anytime you take away lanes, you're putting the road on a diet. And the road that you just did today, right?
Modified road diet on Laurel Street.
Laurel Street, okay. So go out and take a look at it. Now, to prove to you that a road diet's not a new or novel thing, this is a 4-lane road. Every time there's a blizzard, every motorist will turn a 4-lane road into a 2-lane road. Am I right about that? Every motorist will put that median in. Every motorist will put it in the buffer to the curb, which we call a bike lane. So all you have to do is wait until the plows move and then just go and change the dimensions of the road. And we now have put in, I think it's 12 road diets in Hartford, Connecticut. Typically, we'll get the top end speeds down 3 to 7 miles per hour, and the crashes are reduced anywhere from 20 to 60% when we do these diets. We're moving the same number of cars. We're moving them safer. But now we get in the bike lane. To test out the numbers, well, how high can you go with your numbers? This is Kirkland, Washington, where they were running this as 4 lanes, and it was backing up 2 hours every night. So they said, well, let's try something new, and they put in the road diet, 1 lane in each direction, then the center turn lane. That's very powerful magic. Then the bike lanes. And as soon as they did it, the traffic queues disappeared. That's running 21,000 cars a day. But then they had to close down another road entirely to reconstruct it. So now they're running 29,000 cars a day, and they still never backed up the traffic. 4 lanes was never a smart way to build a road. It just wasn't. It was very unsafe, and it really created those awkward situations. And every time you turn left, you are occupying a travel lane. And once you go to a model like this, you're putting the motorists at greater safety, and you're keeping the traffic moving. This used to be 4 lanes. Can you see the old scrub line where the 4 lanes were shown? Back in angle parking, again, my favorite, the valley gutter. that separates. If I were a cyclist, I would have absolutely no problem where I can see if there's anybody in the car and I know the driver can see me. It's a totally different thing than front end angled parking. It takes up less road space. Essentially, you don't have to have that discovery distance. So the travel lane could be as narrow as 11 feet. This is one case where I'll say 10 is probably not enough. Go to 11. And or you could put in bike lanes. We took this road from 5 lanes down to 2. We were moving 23,000 cars before. We're moving 23,000 cars now. We were moving the cars at 40 and 50. We're now moving them at 20. People are getting home sooner. How can that be? We took out all the signals. We put in roundabouts. Roundabouts are one of the most powerful tools for keeping the number of lanes down and the safety way up. 90% of serious crashes disappear. They can't happen anymore. And I know you've had controversy in Fort Collins on roundabouts, right? I was actually involved in one of them, yeah. And I think the important thing is once the roundabouts go in, they become an important gateway. Things get quiet, very peaceful, very simple to ride a bike because now you're bringing the speeds down to bicycling. Very easy to walk instead of crossing 78 feet with 5 lanes. You're crossing 12 or 14 at very low speeds. Some of the other lessons we can gain, New York City, doing incredible things throughout the city. I got to work on this project. This is in front of the Goldman Sachs brand new world headquarters, where we have 30,000 pedestrians a day and only 600 bicyclists. So I had to design it so that the bicyclists would behave with all the pedestrians and the pedestrians would understand the threat of the bicyclists. So we put a lot of really good high quality tools. Some of what we did included visual treatments. In other cases, a very simple way for the cyclist to pause while they're waiting for the queue, a little bit of traffic calming for the cyclists. Bicycle boulevards. I understand you either have, or certainly you have the corridors ready for bicycle boulevards. Is that correct? Is that correct?
We're talking about it.
Talking about it, okay. Bicycle boulevards are very powerful. If I lived on a street and I was offered a bicycle boulevard, I would grab it in a heartbeat. You're going to see less automobile traffic, more walking, more bicycling, more eyes on the street, less noise, less danger, and the secret is to empty whatever that street is at a collector road, so you, as a driver, can't go through, but as a pedestrian or bicyclist, you go straight through. And then sign it and mark it, come up with attractive corridors. Vancouver has many miles of bike lanes. Now let's go to some of the newer tools. Perhaps you've been hearing about these in the media. Left turn boxes on cycle tracks. You see how the cyclist turns into the green box once the signal shifts? And they're out there and they're now able to clear the intersection. It's a very powerful treatment. Again, these are still new. They're not in anybody's Bible yet, but they're working pretty darn well in places like Portland, Oregon. And really a lot of fun just to go and try them out and see if they have application in your own community.
So they block off the lane of traffic when they're in that box?
Well, the traffic can't move anyway because the signal won't let them go. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Are they prohibited from making a vehicular style left turn?
Oh, you could still do that. I'm sure you could still do all the things you would normally do, but it just makes it easier for large numbers of cyclists to be out there in front and so on. And the same thing here. The cyclist advances to the end of the bike lane and now occupies the space so that they're the first ones to leave with the signal. You can colorize them. But again, the cyclist leaves the lane and comes forward. Now they can turn left, they go straight, whatever they want to do. Different colors are being used in different parts of the country. This one, I believe, is in Canada. Special turning boxes in Seattle. By the way, Seattle has been putting in 2 pedestrian or bicycle improvements every day for the last 6 years. Every day. MIT in Boston, this is referred to as a cycle track. It's a separate way. In Vancouver, British Columbia, many special new treatments that they're putting in and getting rave reviews. Really good ways to separate wheels from heels. You always want to put your heels next to the water. The wheels stay away from the water. If you want to see the water, dismount. Now your heel, right? And very, very profound that all these tools are being perfected. You can again separate if you choose to, and steer a bicycle, in this case, behind a delivery zone, colorize it so that people see the conflict territory and get past it. We're going to see a lot of new innovations in the coming months and years. Notice the cobbles that help create a little bit of a rumble, in this case, in Vancouver, and separate tracks for bicycling, as you see here. A little bit of detail. Separate wheels from heels. Color. This is a street, US 27, that was to be resurfaced. The person living in the house to the left knew that was happening, so he asked for bike lanes. They said, okay. And then he said, well, what about colorized bike lanes? And got them. It brought the speeds down on the highway. And the question you probably want to ask is, well, what about, whoops, let me go back. What about the brick? Well, it's not brick, it's asphalt. And it's stamped. But I can ride a high pressure tire and I don't have a clue when I'm on the area that's appearing as brick or the regular asphalt. It's just totally non-distinguishable. And I know this works because that's my house. On college campuses, we can go the next step. We can indicate movement by walking and cycling and bi-directional. But notice what they've done. The motorist can get out of the road and then queue, wait for the trail user, and then likewise coming the other direction, notice the trail sits higher. And so this truly acts as a very good intersection crossing, University of Delft. One of my favorite tools, if we're going to have high compliance of yielding behavior, is to put in these lean bars. Does everybody see that? The lean bars? Give yourself an extra shove when you take off. Easy to start. Also put in some kind of an indicator if people are chatting and they're not paying attention, that they know they're coming upon an intersection. Lots of detailing that goes into our trails. Portland wants to move cyclists behind the transit in this location, so they ramp up, go behind the transit, and then come back in with the bike lane. Now that makes sense because otherwise you'd be fighting the rail, right? I'm a strong proponent of on-street parking for many reasons. But if we're going to do it, my preference is to get the parking down to 6 feet. Get the bike lane at 7. Don't do the opposite. 7 foot for parking is more than is necessary. And 6 feet next to a 7 foot parking lane is just not enough. So you shy up the parking space and you widen out the bike lane. And you can do that right next to 10-foot lanes, as we prove here on the Pacific Coast Highway. Or here. Again, using, in this case, the valley gutter. Now I'm going to show you a brand new tool. I think there are only 2 so far in the nation. One is in Salt Lake. The other is in Long Beach. And we'll get into the details, but I'll go through a couple of series. When we come in and we plan a bicycling project, we like to do all the typical sections and show how things will work. It gives us a chance to modify our numbers a little bit. So I'm going to start with a project we're working on right now, Solana Beach, California, one of the real beach communities. And in this case, you're looking at their existing conditions. What we're now proposing is to put in the angled parking, and then the bike lane, and keep 2 travel lanes, but notice on the far side of the street, we're taking out an entire lane. After we crunch all the traffic numbers, we realize we don't need that lane. It's unnecessary. So we take that out and we shift, we create more of a median and more for parking. And this is basically how we now plan a roadway in the future. We could then do an alternative. We could go down to 1 lane on both sides. And it still works with the traffic numbers. And again, notice we're doing this because we're putting in back-in angled parking. But here's another cool one. We keep what we call 2 lanes, but one of them is not to be driven in by a motorist if there's a bicycle in that lane. It's a standard lane width, but if a bicycle is present as a driver, you go to the other lane. And we could also do it with a low rolling median, one that is mountable, as you see here. So you can see now that we're really looking to test all kinds of new concepts or ideas as we go forward. By the way, one of the great advantages of doing the diagonal parking with the curb ramps is that the motors get a much, much cleaner view of the road before they pull out of a street or a driveway. Much better. In combination, bike lanes with curb extensions. Very powerful safety tool. So this is the experiment I was sharing with you. This happens to be Long Beach. I believe it's called Belmont Shores is the neighborhood. That road, 4 lanes, runs 38,000 cars. That's a very high number. You need 4 lanes to move 38,000. But look what we've done. We've put in colorized, in this case painted, I think it's also an epoxy material. And so we're now seeing lots of people using what is a very busy road that we wouldn't have seen before. The results are coming in dramatically. Less people trying to ride their bike on sidewalks. Many people using their streets. I think this has applications here. And again, it sends a clear message to the cyclists. Stay away from those stupid car doors. You don't want to be over there. And the motorist understands very quickly that this is to be shared. This is not for them anymore. If they want to be in it and look for a parking space, that's great. But if they're not looking for a parking space, they probably belong in the other lane. And again, you're seeing many, many people now riding bikes that weren't out there before. I'm convinced that our bike racks, and I love your bike racks, by the way, but I think we can do even more. I think they should be public works, art, don't you think? Everywhere. These are bike racks in Portland. They're also starting where their bike lanes with a green indicator. These are all just new ideas. They're not in anybody's Bible yet, but I think it works. Motorists realize that they're not to be in that lane. It gives us some queuing information so the cyclists know where to be if they don't want to turn right. Regular Sharrow lanes. Are you using Sharrows?
No.
Not. Okay. It's this. It's basically a bicycle with the 2 chevrons that basically says share the lane. If a bicycle is here, they own the lane. So we're going to see a lot of inventing in our country as we go forward. These are scenes I'm sure you're familiar with in Boulder, the transition away from the edge, and then the direction through the center of the intersection. Detector for the bicycle. Another use of paint. This is, by the way, nothing more than tennis court paint. But by making the bike lane appear more dominant and having the travel lane only be, in this case, 8 feet wide, it brought the speeds down in the neighborhood dramatically. Caltrans, California DOT, is now doing shoulders using colorized, stamped shoulders. And again, you see the treatment out in front of my own house. A little bit on crossings. Getting across the road is equally the challenge as being able to travel along the road. We want our crossings to be very well marked. Create a shadow effect so you only have to go one conflict direction at a time. This is done very well. And very noticeable with both the pavements, markings, and the signing. Aspen, using raised tables along with some of their crossings. Davis, California, purposely puts in the skew. 3 advantages. 1, you can't run across the street. 2, it forces you to look at the driver. 3, you get more storage space. Really good markings, and again, here where you're definitely getting snow, to maybe grind down a little bit so that you get the markings down where they don't get scraped by snow plows and other maintenance issues. Special crossings that pulse when you go to cross, and then many, many different applications of using trail crossings, including, and this is my preference, don't put in the bar in the middle, go for a full raised median and force bicycles down to riding single file through an intersection. No more groupthink, right? Another angle, this by the way is a road diet with the crossing now at a school. And again, you can see the advantage. Well, let me stop here. I wanted to allow time for discussion. And was that helpful, folks? Give you an idea? Okay. Oh, I just realized there are a couple images I just have to show you. This is Manitou Springs, by the way. We took 4 lanes down to 3. Really dramatic. Retail trade jumped 30% once we took out some of the lanes. Very beautiful Aspen, right? Incredible, the investments being made for a bicycle trail. Same in Seattle, Washington. Works of art owned by a corporation that was wanting a permit to build another pier. They said, sure, build us a nice bike bridge and you've got your pier, your permit. A restaurant out in the middle of a bike trail in Winnipeg. Calgary, Alberta, 20 degrees out, and I saw more people coming in by bicycle on this day than I've seen in almost any city in the United States. The light rail on top, the trail underneath. Beautiful work of art. What about water? Now, I don't know, how do you pronounce the name of the river? Poudre? Poudre River. Is it navigable? Could you do something like vacations by boat and bike? Oh, you can. It's just rafting. Okay, well, if you had canals, then you could do something like this. You rent these barge boats for a weekend or a week or 2 weeks, cook on board, you pull over somewhere, you ride the trails for hours, or you go out for the whole day and somebody else brings the boat to pick you up. I think we're going to see a lot of innovations over time where we combine vacations. This happens to be in the Rochester, New York area. Yeah, beautiful what they've done with their canals, and again, turning them into vacations. And so many things we're going to find that we can do. And again, Colorado has so many advantages when it comes to the things. But what if you wanted to get across the river? What about a chain ferry? In this case, you basically use human power to get across. This is what the chain ferry looks like. There's only one left right now, Saugatuck. But this could be a whole industry. There are many places where trails need to cross, where you just basically row it across. And I probably should cover this topic of security. We need trails to require homes, schools, all properties to watch over the trail. And again, an example in Davis, California, the homes are watching over the trail. Near Aspen, Colorado, the homes are built around the trail. Boulder is now doing that? Okay, so let's stop there now. Okay, was that helpful? And let's have questions. Yeah, question.
I have 2 questions. Where does the mass transportation go when you decrease the lane size?
Mass transit still needs to operate in whatever dedicated lanes we can give them. There's nothing wrong with 10-foot lanes for transit. The widest transit bus that can operate on a road, or a semi for that matter, is 8.5 feet. A 10-foot lane, a professional driver, the buffer of a bike lane right next to it can work in good combination. But there are other things we look at when we put 10-foot lanes next to a bike lane. What's the volume of transit? What what are the other issues that we deal with? Yeah, we see yes, the question is, do we, in combination, when we add more cycling and transit, they're really they're not competitive modes of travel.
Each other.
Yeah, when you build one system, you're actually building both systems. Yeah, and this gentleman.
We're talking about culture change in many respects, and you're talking about trying to engineer it on one hand. We have at least a half a dozen league cycling instructors of the League of American Bicyclists in this room. What role should that group be playing in this process?
Well, I think it's very important, and I'm a trained effective cycling instructor myself, and I've trained effective cycling instructors. I think it's important to understand that all of us have a role in making bicycling mainstream. That we want the best role models of highly skilled bicyclists out there showing other people what you should be doing. And, but acknowledge that not everybody wants to ride in the street. They want trails, they want other systems. We have to have multiple systems, and we, as advocates of the change, should just be supporting everything it takes to get more and more and more people to ride bikes. The more people ride bikes, the safer it becomes. I don't know what your statistics are, but Davis typically loses one bicyclist every 18 years. And that's with phenomenal riding. Nearly, I think there have been times where the riding was at least 40% of the movement. And so the more people ride, the more the motors forms a signature of the rider, and therefore the safer it becomes. I see it. Well, let's favor this room for just a little bit. Yeah, the question is, what pushback do we get from motors seeing their money being spent for those people's bike trails? It's a matter of informing everybody about what the real issues are. If all they want is more cars joining them on the road, then great, they can have that. But if what they want is more people not climbing into an automobile to be part of that congestion, then they should be the strongest advocates for getting other systems in place. And in fact, here's a funny story. In Madison, for years, if the city council didn't vote for a bicycle facility that the bicycling public wanted, that night they'd get on their phone chain, and the next morning, every one of them would drive a car. And it would bring the city council to its knees, and they'd say, we beg you to park your cars and start riding your bikes again. And then for another 3 or 4 years, they would always vote for the bicycle treatment. So it really is a matter of informing people that everyone wins when you get more mode balance working. Great question. Now we'll go to the other side. Right. With the whole issue of ADA with roundabouts, the issue really is about design. Engineers are capable of doing very, very profound design that works for everybody, including people who are blind. And it is much easier, as an example, for a person who is blind to cross one 14-foot lane at a time at very low speed than it is to cross a 50 or 60-foot road where there would never be a signal to begin with. It is very important to understand that in the blind community itself, this has become a very fractionalized, polarized issue, largely because there's a very vocal component of the blind that is much stronger than the average blind person. In other words, I think just like with bicycling, we have effective cyclists who represent a very minute minority of cyclists. It's also true in the blind community. There's one group that's very vocal, and for some appropriate reasons, they are against roundabouts that are not designed correctly. I went out to a 2-lane roundabout design in Columbus, Ohio with a blind woman, fully blind, couldn't see a thing. About 85% of blind folks have some vision, but she had no vision. She had a blind, or a guide dog, and the guide dog was very noticeable, and we couldn't get a single motorist to yield to her because it was designed so poorly. It was designed for high speed. In a nutshell, any roundabout in your community should have a 15 or 20 mile an hour entry speed based on the deflection path, and a 15 or 20 mile an hour exit speed, and no more on every single leg. And so if you build some bad roundabouts, it will create a lot of ill will And so I always encourage communities to hire the best engineering and get good reviews before you build your first roundabouts, and to keep with that always. Yeah, good question. Yes, and this gentleman, yeah. Yes, how do we get beyond a lot of rail company rules that don't permit any crossings at all, no matter whether they're for cars or bikes at grade? It's a very tough thing to do. I'm convinced that we're going to need, over time, to get Congress involved if we're going to give any favors to a rail company, that we say, okay, we'll give you this, but you give us these 63 crossings that you've ignored for the last 30 years. And that's just part of the deal. You know, we can help them design them so that you'd have to be trying to commit suicide if you were to be hit by a train. We have several communities, Encinitas is one, where they get 22 high-speed trains a day, and they're not permitting any crossings, and yet you watch the children cross over a 3-mile section. If we could bring that to 1 or 2 good locations, the children would be safer. The engineer that would have to deal with the tragedy is less likely to ever have to deal with a tragedy if we can design something correctly. But the rail companies have not kept an open ear, and it's just sad. But I'm convinced that politically we can create the right muscle. One day they're going to ask for something that we say, you know, we'd like you to have that, but you give us these 6 crossings. We've been begging for them for 12 years, you know, something like that. Yeah. And someone else had a question here before I move? Okay. Now we go over.
Have you ever seen that used in this country?
No, but I know exactly what you're talking about. I love it. What we're talking about is a counter on the side of the road with a beautiful display. And you know, this hour, you're the 832nd bicyclist who rode by. They're doing them in Denmark as well, Copenhagen. You can go on YouTube and dial in the right information, bicycle counters in Denmark or something. You'll probably be able to watch the video. The whole video is just powerful. And it really shows how far advanced many European nations are over any city in North America. A couple of things I want to say as closing statements, and that is 25 years ago, hardly anyone rode a bike in many European nations. Now, the numbers are so vast that it just boggles the mind. There was a time in China, after the bicycle had been introduced, I was able to be there in 1981, shortly after bicycles were affordable. And it took a lot of money for someone to buy a bicycle in China. And it was just a sea of bicycles everywhere. If you didn't have a bell on your bicycle, you couldn't ride your bike. People wouldn't know you're coming. You had to, in fact. Then a rule was changed in China. I was there for the United Nations to work with solving bicycle problems in China about 10 years later. And what the officials of the government wanted us as experts from the United Nations to tell them is how to solve the bicycle problem. And we looked at them, we said, you don't have a bicycle problem. You have a bicycle solution. But they tried to ban the bike or certainly discourage its use. They wanted to go to the motordom route. That has fouled their air in ways that you cannot even begin to measure. It has created traffic congestion, and delays are just insurmountable. Now China is beginning to realize, again, the bicycle is the solution. But they had to come to that on their own. It's time for us to discover that. And maybe we only discover it one town at a time. And that's why when I look out on Fort Collins, as I did today, I see much, much hope that the solutions are out there, that we have to work very hard to get them in place. We have to have incentives to get them in place. And right now, the big problem with getting more bicycling is not do you get enough facilities in or whatever. It's stop giving away free parking. Make the motors pay their fair share. If they drive a car everywhere, then they pay for their parking at work, wherever, and stop incentivizing driving by trying to get rid of congestion. Let congestion do the work that it's designed to do. And in every aspect, think more like Europeans and get our economy to where we can afford to be competitive in the world economy again. We're getting this wonderful wake-up call right now as a nation that we had better start to recalibrate how we move. Transportation equity in this country, I'm going to use a scientific term, sucks. It does. People of low income, people of, they're too young, they're too old, any reason, who can't drive a car do not have transportation in our country. You have to very carefully handpick where you move to if you want to get by without an automobile. And or beg for rides all the time as a child, as a senior, as a person with a disability. This year, my wife and I are going to give up our car. We're never going to drive a car of our own again. We lived until the age of 35 without a car. We met more people. We had a greater social life because we didn't own a car, and we want that back. We want back our health, we want back everything. So it's a commitment we're making. We could do that right here. We really could. We're going to do it in Port Townsend, where having a car is just dumb, right? Why would you want a car in Port Townsend? But the same thing is, more and more people are going to choose to bring a business, start a new employment base, because they want to retain employees. And if that means an active living, active lifestyle, then you've got a huge, huge edge on so many other communities in the nation. And just act on that. Don't think of bicycling as being a frill. It is not. It is the basic for gooding people, good health, good exercise, good social life, and good economics for personal and for our nation's need. The era is coming. Thank you, folks. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dan. Really appreciate having you come to Fort Collins. Great presentation.